In a bustling coastal city, two starkly different lives were about to collide. Captain Aaron Mitchell was celebrated as a skilled admiral in the Navy, known for his strategic brilliance and commanding presence. With sharp blue eyes and a steel-gray uniform that accentuated his authoritative stance, he often inspired respect wherever he went. At 50 years old, he had climbed the ranks through dedication and irrefutable talent, earning him both admiration and fear in equal measure. One fateful afternoon, the Admiral attended a naval charity event meant to showcase support for local veteran families. The sun shimmered on the water, creating a picturesque backdrop that attracted attendees from all over the area. People mingled, sharing laughter and stories while children played nearby. For Captain Mitchell, this event felt like an opportunity to connect with the community and reinforce positive relations with the public. On the other end of the spectrum stood Claire Robinson, a spirited 23-year-old with an adventurous heart. She was passionate about advocating for social justice and often spoke out against inequality. With her wild curls dancing in the summer breeze and her bright green shirt adorned with bold messages of empowerment, Claire possessed an energy that electrified those around her. Unlike the Admiral, who represented authority, she embodied youthful rebellion and hope for change. Claire had come to the event not just to enjoy it, but to challenge military leadership on how veterans were treated after returning home. Armed with her unwavering convictions and courage, she intended to make her voice heard amid polite conversation and guarded smiles. As she weaved through the crowd, she took notice of Captain Mitchell engaging with a group of admirers, boasting stories of past glories while overshadowing voices calling for reform. The differences between them were stark. Where Captain Mitchell found comfort in tradition, Claire thrived on progress and questioning the status quo. As they stood in close proximity without knowledge of each other's thoughts or intentions, an invisible tension began building in the air. The two characters would soon intersect in ways neither could predict. Instead of striking up a cordial exchange or sharing a lighthearted joke about life at sea versus life on land, something that might have bridged their worlds instead, the friction between their opposing ideals rapidly ignited. Amid celebratory tones that filled the atmosphere, Claire suddenly decided it was time to approach the Admiral directly. She wanted him to hear firsthand what it meant for young veterans returning from service, not just statistics or case studies presented in reports designed to incite sympathy, but real stories filled with hope and despair. Her decision came at that very moment, when Captain Mitchell mentioned something dismissive about youth's not understanding duty. Little did either of them know that this exchange would escalate from words into chaos in mere heartbeats. A whirlwind change from quiet words spoken under sunny skies to explosive action on a public stage where fantasies meet reality. In mere moments, their lives would forever be intertwined by circumstances far more unpredictable than either could have ever imagined. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the bustling waterfront. The charity event was set against the backdrop of the deep blue ocean, where sailboats danced lightly on the waves and the salty breeze carried laughter and chatter from families enjoying their Saturday. Colorful banners flapped gently, each one bearing messages of support for local veterans who had served bravely in various conflicts. A large tent stood proud on the sandy beach, filled with tables adorned with vibrant centerpieces made of flowers and flags. Volunteers moved energetically, serving snacks and drinks while chatting with attendees. Children ran around, their giggles ringing out like music as they played tag near the water's edge, unaware of the tension brewing among the adults. As Claire surveyed the scene, She felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was not just another event for her. It was a platform to voice her concerns. She spotted several veterans mingling with families, sharing stories that often oscillated between laughter and moments of solemn reflection. Her heart swelled at the sight of those who had served, but sank when she remembered why she was there, because many were struggling to find their place back home. In contrast, Admiral Mitchell stood confidently at the front of the tent, proudly accepting accolades from admirers gathered around him. The Admiral's presence commanded respect. His sharp gray uniform gleamed under the sunlight as he recounted tales of bravery and camaraderie at sea. With each story he told, he painted vivid pictures of heroism that enchanted his audience. Yet for Claire, these were not just stories. They felt like distractions from pressing issues that desperately needed attention. As people surrounded him, whispering words of admiration and gratitude, Claire couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. She watched as he basked in their praise while seemingly ignoring those who had fallen through the cracks upon returning from service, the veterans whose voices were drowned out by cheers for military glory. The atmosphere shifted subtly as Claire drew nearer to where Admiral Mitchell stood. The sounds of laughter began to fade into a distant hum in her ears. It was as if time slowed down for her. She could feel her heart pounding, each beat amplifying her determination to speak up about what truly mattered. With every step forward, she noticed how people turned to glance at her. A young woman amidst a sea of uniforms and polished shoes. Their looks were mixed, some intrigued by her boldness, others disapproving or confused by her presence among such esteemed company. As she finally reached Mitchell's side, an uneasy silence hung in the air like a thick fog. The Admiral finished his story and turned toward Claire with a curious expression on his face. In that moment, between applause echoing around them and children's laughter wafting down from nearby, an invisible line divided them not just by age or rank, but by ideals that felt miles apart. What lay ahead was uncertain. Neither could predict how this encounter would unravel amidst such vibrant surroundings filled with hope and celebration. A setting ripe for change, yet precariously close to conflict. Within moments, everything would shift dramatically as two worlds collided in an unexpected explosion of emotions and actions under that bright summer sky. The air crackled with an unspoken tension as Claire stood face to face with Admiral Mitchell. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two figures standing at the center of the event, a young woman fueled by passion and a seasoned man wrapped in authority. With admiration shining in the eyes of onlookers, Claire felt both empowered and daunted. Gathering her courage, she cleared her throat, breaking the stillness that hung heavy between them. "Admiral Mitchell," she began, her voice slightly wavering but growing steadier with each word. "Thank you for your service, but I believe we need to discuss something important about how veterans are treated after they return home." The Admiral turned to her fully, his sharp blue eyes narrowing as interest mingled with annoyance. "You're quite brave to speak up like this," he said lightly, albeit dismissively. "But I assure you, our veterans are taken care of through various programs and support systems." His confidence radiated as he gestured dismissively toward the crowd behind him. But Claire was undeterred. Her heart raced, propelling her forward. She could see a group of veterans nearby listening attentively, but not everyone was being heard, and that ignited a fire within her. "With all due respect, sir," she pressed on, "the reality is much different for many of them. Some can't find steady jobs or adequate mental health care. They need more than empty promises." As those words tumbled from her lips, Claire sensed an immediate shift amongst the crowd. A few heads leaned in closer to catch every syllable while others exchanged looks of disbelief. Some were dismayed by her boldness standing against such a decorated figure. Admiral Mitchell's expression darkened slightly, an edge creeping into his voice now tinged with irritation. "It's easy to criticize what you don't understand," he retorted sharply. The applause from earlier faded into tension-filled silence as their exchange drew all eyes toward them. Claire's determination spiked. She knew this moment mattered greatly, for herself, for those veterans who struggled silently each day. "I may not wear your uniform or have your experience," she shot back, defiantly, "but I can listen and advocate. We must do more than just commend their service. We need real action." At that point, spectators began murmuring among themselves. Whispers about who was right and who was wrong started spreading like wildfire in the crowd, while Claire's heart raced, sensing a pivotal moment unfolding. The Admiral folded his arms across his chest defensively, his jaw tightening as he scanned the crowd around him. It was clear he wasn't accustomed to being challenged so directly in public. "And do you think creating chaos here will bring about change?" he asked incredulously. Before Claire could respond, before reason could prevail, the unexpected happened. A sharp movement followed by an even sharper crack resounded through the air as Captain Mitchell abruptly struck out with his hand across her cheek. Gasps echoed around them as people staggered back from the scene in shock at such aggression being displayed before them at an event meant to honor heroes and community support alike. In the razor-thin moment after impact came another quick shift. Claire's instinct kicked in as fury surged through her veins. Milliseconds later, she reacted sharply, pivoting on one foot with grit. A punch flew back toward Mitchell's face faster than anyone could process. A whirlwind had ignited around them. It was no longer just a conversation, but a full-blown conflict unfolding right before their eyes. An unexpected clash, where ideologies collided painfully under a radiant sky now turned shadowy and charged with energy ready for an explosion that would change everything forever. The moment Claire's punch landed squarely on Admiral Mitchell's jaw, a collective gasp erupted from the crowd, echoing like a shockwave. For a brief second, time stood still as everyone absorbed the chaotic transformation of a genteel charity event into an unexpected scene of conflict. Bystanders were now caught in a tumultuous sea of mixed reactions. Faces turned pale with disbelief, while others lit up with excitement, some cheering quietly for Claire's boldness. Children, initially swept up in innocent games nearby, were pulled away from their play and widened their eyes, taking in the scene unfolding before them. "Did that really just happen?" whispered one attendee to another, their words barely audible over the rising clamor. Eyes darted between the Admiral, who was stunned and momentarily off balance, and Claire, her knuckles tinged red, but her spirit fiery and resolute. As Admiral Mitchell steadied himself and glanced fiercely at Claire after shaking off the impact of her blow, several spectators shifted nervously. Some did not know whether to intervene or remain spectators, while some appeared to revel in the drama unfolding in front of them. A woman wearing a navy blue dress stepped forward from the throng. "You can't hit her like that," she called out defiantly. Her voice pierced through the confusion, challenging the authority behind Mitchell's uniform. Others nodded in agreement, murmuring support for Claire's decision to stand up for what she believed in. Yet not everyone felt supportive. Others were aghast at what they had just witnessed and rushed to offer aid to Admiral Mitchell. "Are you all right, sir?" one elderly man asked hesitantly as he approached him cautiously. With concern etched on his face, He tried to separate the wandering stares fixed on the two figures at the center of this crisis, a spectacle no one would soon forget. As whispers spread through the crowd like ripples on water, people began to voice their opinions on social media through phones raised high. It was no longer just about veterans' issues. It became a battle of public perception under bright sunlit skies that suddenly felt oppressive with underlying tension. "We should call security!" someone shouted from further back in the crowd, while another countered enthusiastically with, "No, let them sort it out." Claire watched as emotions surged around her like a wave crashing against the shore. She took a breath that expanded her chest, her heart thrumming fast, but remained steadfast despite her own uncertainty. The world around her pulsed with adrenaline as she waited for Admiral Mitchell's next move. With curiosity navigating between factions forming upon opposing sides based on loyalties either toward tradition or progressive change, this simple charity event morphed into a crucible where ideals battled fiercely, each stare from bystanders reinforcing what was at stake for both parties involved. The Admiral adjusted his stance, aware he needed to regain control, not just of himself, but also whatever vestiges of authority he once held among those watching keenly, now searching for answers. Yet it was too late. The narrative had shifted across those gathered, now resonating louder than mere applause during his speeches filled with tales of honor and valor. Bystanders still lingered amid uncertain outcomes, plotting where allegiance will land amidst tumultuous feelings swelling. Some rooting for Claire's fight against perceived injustices, while others rallied tightly behind the old guard fighting against sudden change. An explosive convergence presenting both sides clamoring loudly under one sunny afternoon sky, ready to grapple for understandings not easily achieved, without consequences, drawn painfully across narratives demanding resolution amid public glare. As the punch connected with Admiral Mitchell's jaw, the world around Claire seemed to narrow. The initial shock quickly faded into a fierce determination. Claire felt a surge of adrenaline flood through her veins. In that split second, she was no longer a young activist, but a warrior fighting for voices that had long been silenced. Mitchell staggered back, momentarily dazed by the unexpected assault. His mind raced to process what had just happened. He had never been challenged like this in public, and certainly not by someone so much younger and seemingly less experienced. As his hand instinctively moved to his face, Claire seized the moment. Gritting her teeth, she prepared to follow up on her surprise attack rather than retreat. In the midst of the stunned silence that enveloped the crowd, Claire's instincts kicked in. She pivoted her body, channeling every ounce of energy into another strike, a powerful roundhouse kick aimed directly at the Admiral's midsection. People gasped, some shouting in alarm as they realized how quickly the situation escalated from an argument to an actual fight. Unprepared for another attack, Mitchell instinctively raised his arms to protect himself. The kick connected with his side, causing him to double over. He had faced dangerous situations on the battlefield, but never one like this, fighting not just against an opponent, but against public opinion that was now swirling around him like a storm. Witnesses continued watching with wide eyes. Some shouted encouragement for Claire, while others urged restraint. "Stop it!" someone yelled from the back of the crowd. "You're representing all of us!" Yet, at that moment, Claire felt nothing but clarity. This was her moment to stand up for veterans who had suffered in silence far too long. With the Admiral momentarily compromised, she took a step back, breathing hard but maintaining her stance, as if preparing for another round. The crowd was electrified. Cameras flashed as people caught the unfolding drama on their phones. This wasn't just an argument about veterans' rights anymore. It was turning into a spectacle that would undoubtedly make headlines. "Enough!" Admiral Mitchell finally managed to exclaim, regaining his composure as he straightened up and glared at Claire. Despite his rigid posture, there was something different about him now. Whether it was anger or respect for her courage remained unclear even to him. "This isn't how we handle disagreements." But Claire wasn't about to let him dictate the terms. "This is exactly how we handle things," she shot back defiantly. "You only hear us when we fight back. Too long have you turned your back on those who served." Her voice rang clear through the chaos, resonating with truth that struck at the heart of those who listened. The crowd reacted again. Murmurs of agreement rippled through them as people weighed in on both sides, some still standing by the Admiral's authority, while others began to shift their perspective toward Claire's fierce passion. Admirers of tradition now found themselves questioning whether authority should come without accountability. As Claire stood her ground, fists clenched and ready, she was aware that she'd crossed a threshold. Something raw and powerful hung in the air between them, like an unspoken challenge. The tension in the atmosphere thickened. There would be no easy resolution today. Even so, as bystanders continued to react with astonishment and intrigue, one thing became clear. This unexpected counteraction had shifted not only their fight, but also the very narrative surrounding veterans' rights and authority itself. What began as polite conversation transformed into a groundbreaking moment that promised to challenge societal norms long held sacred under bright summer skies, turned overcast with uncertainty and anticipation. As the confrontation unfolded, anticipation hung thick in the air. Claire, her heart racing, sensed the momentum turning in her favor. The crowd was no longer just passive observers. They were participants in a moment that would be talked about for years to come. An electric current of energy surged through her as she prepared for her next move. With Admiral Mitchell now visibly shaken by her previous strikes, Claire felt a surge of confidence. She had his attention, and she intended to make it count. Just as Mitchell regained his footing, she launched herself forward, channeling every ounce of her determination into one final, decisive blow. In an instant, Claire feigned a jab to the left, causing the Admiral to instinctively shift his weight in response. Seizing the opportunity, she pivoted on her right foot and threw a powerful uppercut. Time slowed as her fist moved toward him. In that brief moment, it felt as though the entire world had fallen silent, suspended between her action and its consequence. The punch connected with a resounding crack that echoed across the tent like a thunderclap. Admiral Mitchell's head snapped back violently from the force of the blow, his eyes wide with shock as he lost balance and stumbled backward. In those fleeting milliseconds, everything shifted. The crowd's reactions morphed from disbelief to astonishment. Gasps erupted from onlookers as Mitchell hit the ground with a heavy thud, landing on the soft sand beneath them. Silence followed, thick and suffocating, as people processed what had just occurred. Claire stood frozen for a beat, heart pounding and breath quickening as she stared down at the Admiral, who now lay flat on his back, stunned and vulnerable. Gradually, the crowd erupted into a flurry of noise. Some cheered, others gasped in horror, and a few clapped in support for Claire's audacity. "Did you see that?" Someone shouted excitedly from the outskirts of the crowd, while another voice cried out in disbelief, "Call for help!" The scene had transformed dramatically, from a civil discourse interrupted by rising tension to an explosive moment that shook the very foundations of authority present at the event. With Mitchell down for the count, Claire realized she had done something unthinkable. She had knocked out an admiral in front of a crowd that had gathered to honor him. As Claire looked around at the flurry of emotions painted across faces, some shocked, some exhilarated, she felt both exhilaration and uncertainty wash over her. This was no longer just about her feelings towards veterans' treatment. It had become a much larger statement about standing up against established power structures that marginalized voices calling for change. But as she took in the chaos around her, the people pulling out their phones to document the event, others rushing to aid Admiral Mitchell, she knew that this moment would have consequences far beyond this charity event. The narrative surrounding veterans' rights was shifting dramatically before her eyes, slipping away from respectful dialogue and into the realm of raw emotion and physical confrontation. Claire's adrenaline began to fade slightly as she watched Mitchell slowly regain consciousness, confusion etched on his face as he blinked up at the sky. She could feel tension in the air again. This time it was different. A new kind of energy simmered beneath the surface, ready to ignite further conversations about respect, authority, and the urgent need for change in how society treated those who served their country. What started as a simple event honoring veterans morphed into an unexpected climax that redefined roles and set the stage for future discussions on accountability, both personal and institutional, amidst bright summer skies now shadowed with uncertainty about what lay ahead for both Claire and Admiral Mitchell. The aftermath of Claire's knockout punch rippled through the crowd like a shockwave, leaving an atmosphere thick with uncertainty and tension. As Admiral Mitchell lay on the ground, the stunned silence that had followed his fall began to shift into a cacophony of voices. People rushed forward, some checking on the Admiral, while others turned their attention to Claire, who stood at the center of it all, breathless and wide-eyed. "Someone call for help!" shouted a bystander, urgency creeping into their voice as they reached for their phone. Others scrambled to assist Admiral Mitchell, who was now attempting to sit up, confusion etched across his face. The once celebrated hero now looked vulnerable and disoriented, struggling to regain his bearings amid the chaos. Claire felt her heart pounding furiously in her chest. The adrenaline that had fueled her earlier actions began to ebb away, replaced by a rush of mixed emotions: triumph over standing up for what she believed in, and anxiety over the repercussions of her sudden violence. As she took a step back from the crowd, she could feel the weight of their gazes upon her, some filled with admiration, others laced with disapproval. "You were amazing!" someone shouted from the back row, prompting a small wave of applause that grew louder amidst murmurs of agreement. Yet not everyone shared in that sentiment. Several attendees looked visibly shaken, shaking their heads or casting disappointed glances in Claire's direction. "What have you done?" a man muttered angrily as he walked past her. "This isn't how we make change." His words struck deep as Claire realized that her actions had not only altered the course of this event, but also the perception of activism itself. As paramedics finally arrived on the scene, Claire watched as they knelt beside Admiral Mitchell, quickly assessing his condition. He winced slightly, but managed to push himself up against a nearby table for support. In that moment, something shifted within him. A mix of anger and newfound respect flickered in his eyes when they met Claire's gaze. She could sense he understood now what it meant to be confronted directly. While medical personnel tended to him, Claire found herself surrounded by reporters who had congregated almost instantly. Microphones were thrust toward her face as questions flew. What prompted your actions? Do you regret hitting an admiral? How do you respond to critics? It felt overwhelming. She had never intended to become a headline or be thrust into the public eye in such an explosive manner. "I stand by my actions," Claire replied firmly, trying to maintain her composure despite the chaos surrounding her. This was about more than just one person. It's about ensuring that veterans are heard and treated with respect. With each word spoken into those cameras, she felt a sense of purpose rekindle within her. This was now bigger than herself. It was about igniting conversations around veterans' rights that had remained dormant for far too long. Several attendees approached Claire afterward. Their faces showed concern mingled with admiration, and began discussing ideas for future advocacy efforts and ways they might work together moving forward. In that moment of connection among new allies forged from chaos, she could see a path forming before her. Meanwhile, Admiral Mitchell was helped to his feet by paramedics and colleagues who had rushed over after witnessing the incident unfold. Though still rattled from the confrontation, there was a newfound awareness about him. He seemed determined not just to regain his authority, but also to engage in meaningful dialogue regarding veterans' issues rather than sidestepping them. As he made eye contact with Claire once more across the bustling scene filled with chatter and flashing lights, an unspoken acknowledgement passed between them. A recognition that they had both crossed into uncharted territory. Their lives would never be quite the same after this explosive encounter at what was meant to be simply a charitable gathering under sunny skies now darkened with uncertainty but illuminated by possibility for change ahead. As the dust settled from the confrontation, the consequences of Claire's actions began to unfold, reverberating far beyond that single moment at the charity event. The clash had sparked a firestorm of media attention, and the news quickly spread throughout the city and beyond. Headlines blared about the unexpected knockout of an admiral by a young activist, framing the story as both a sensational clash of personalities and a critical discussion of veterans' rights. In the days following the incident, Claire found herself thrust into the spotlight. Interviews flooded in, with journalists eager to capture her story. Cameras were suddenly everywhere, capturing her determination as she spoke passionately about veterans' issues. Although she had sought to raise awareness, she hadn't anticipated becoming a household name overnight. With newfound notoriety came scrutiny. Some media outlets praised her courage, heralding her as a symbol of resistance against authority, while others accused her of resorting to violence and undermining her cause. Social media erupted with divided opinions. Supporters rallied behind her message of reform, while critics condemned her methods as counterproductive. Claire scrolled through the comments, feeling both buoyed by encouragement and weighed down by harsh backlash. Admiral Mitchell's response to the knockout also set off ripples in both military and civilian circles. After recovering from his injuries, he faced intense pressure from his superiors and peers regarding how to address this unprecedented situation. Some called for disciplinary action against Claire, while others argued that it was time for an honest conversation about the issues she had raised. The public eye scrutinized his every move. He was no longer just a respected admiral, but a figure who had been publicly challenged in a way that demanded accountability. Mitchell decided to take an unusual path for someone in his position. Instead of dismissing Claire outright or attempting to downplay the incident, he issued a statement acknowledging that the confrontation highlighted underlying issues faced by veterans that needed addressing. "I learned today that we must listen more closely to those we serve," he said during a press conference filled with cameras and reporters. Claire's actions have shown us that silence is no longer acceptable. The Admiral's willingness to engage changed the tide of public opinion once again. Many applauded his decision to confront his own vulnerability rather than lash out against Claire. It became a turning point for both him and his image as a leader within military circles. Faced with mounting pressure from veterans organizations and activists alike, Mitchell arranged for a community forum focused on veterans affairs, where both sides could engage in open dialogue about necessary reforms. He invited Claire personally, recognizing her passion and commitment to making changes for those who served. The event was set up in response to not only address the issues raised, but also to create an ongoing dialogue between active military personnel and civilians advocating for veterans' rights. It caught nationwide attention as communities rallied around veterans, shedding light on their struggles in transitioning from service back into civilian life. As Claire prepared for that forum, she felt anxious yet hopeful. This was an opportunity, not just for herself, but also for countless veterans whose voices deserved recognition. She understood now that her actions had initiated something significant, a chance to change hearts and minds through constructive conversation instead of conflict. The dramatic events at the charity event became a catalyst for long overdue discussions about respect, authority, and accountability in society regarding how veterans were treated. While Claire carried the weight of responsibility for her actions, she also recognized their potential to effect meaningful change, unifying people under a common cause to ensure that those who served were heard as they navigated life after duty. As Claire prepared for the community forum, she found herself reflecting deeply on the events that had transpired at the charity event. The whirlwind of emotions and reactions surrounding her knockout punch weighed heavily on her mind. What had begun as an attempt to advocate for veterans had morphed into a public spectacle, and she struggled to reconcile the violence of her actions with the message she sought to convey. Sitting quietly in her room, Claire replayed the incident over and over. She recalled the shock on Admiral Mitchell's face when her fist struck him, the stunned silence that followed, and then the chaotic eruption of voices from the crowd. It was a moment that had shifted everything, yet it raised uncomfortable questions about how far one should go to make a point. Had she crossed an essential line? Was violence ever justified in the pursuit of justice? As she considered these questions, Claire recognized that while her actions had drawn attention to an important cause, they also overshadowed the very issues she wanted to address. This realization stung. Although she had sparked conversations about veterans' rights, she feared that many would only remember the fight rather than the message behind it. She wanted respect for veterans and acknowledgement of their struggles, but did her method of seeking attention undermine that respect? Admiral Mitchell's decision to engage in dialogue instead of retaliation further complicated her thoughts. He had chosen a path of reflection and openness, which contrasted sharply with her own impulsive reaction. She admired his ability to navigate difficult conversations without resorting to aggression. It was a lesson she needed to learn. The day of the forum arrived, filled with uncertainty but also hope. Claire stepped onto the stage alongside Admiral Mitchell, both aware that this was more than just a discussion. It was a chance for healing and understanding. The audience was filled with veterans, families, activists, and supporters, all eager to share their perspectives or hear what would unfold. As they began speaking, Claire listened intently as Admiral Mitchell acknowledged his own shortcomings in addressing veterans' needs. "I've realized that true leadership means listening, not just giving speeches," he said earnestly. "It requires being open to uncomfortable truths." Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her as he spoke. It was clear he was taking responsibility not just for his past actions, but for fostering a more inclusive conversation about veterans' rights going forward. She recognized that this was where respect truly lay, not in dominance or authority, but in collaboration and understanding. When it was her turn to speak, Claire took a deep breath and addressed the crowd with sincerity. "I acted out of frustration because I care deeply about our veterans," she confessed. "But I know now that there are better ways to express that passion without resorting to violence. We need dialogue, not conflict." The atmosphere shifted as attendees nodded in agreement. It was clear they were ready for meaningful discussions rather than divisive confrontations. As hands shot up across the room, some eager to share personal stories and others asking how they could take action together, Claire felt optimistic about what lay ahead. In reflecting on violence and respect during this pivotal moment, both Claire and Admiral Mitchell understood that while passion could ignite change, it must be tempered with empathy and dialogue. They were united not just by their shared experiences, but by a commitment to ensure that those who served were treated with dignity and respect, a goal worth pursuing through peaceful means. This forum marked a new beginning for both individuals. They recognized that their paths intertwined not just through confrontation, but through collaboration aimed at creating real change for veterans everywhere. As conversations flourished in that space filled with hope, Claire felt empowered by their shared resolve to push forward, not through punches thrown, but through hands joined in solidarity toward progress. As the community forum concluded, a palpable sense of hope filled the room. Claire and Admiral Mitchell stood side by side, having navigated the labyrinth of emotions that pulsed through them both since that fateful day at the charity event. The incident had catalyzed not just public conversations, but personal transformations, reshaping their perceptions of authority, advocacy, and the power of dialogue. The realization that emerged from this journey was powerful. While passion is essential in advocating for change, understanding and mutual respect are equally important. Claire had learned that a single moment, driven by frustration and a desire to be heard, could overshadow the very message she wished to convey. She recognized now that true progress required patience, conversation, and collaboration rather than confrontation. Admiral Mitchell's evolution served as a mirror to her own. Initially seen as an untouchable figure of authority, he had come to terms with his vulnerabilities and acknowledged the failings within systems intended to support veterans. His willingness to engage with Claire and the larger community indicated a shift in leadership styles, one that embraced empathy rather than dominance. Together, they had demonstrated that even those on opposing sides could unite for a common cause. The discussions during the forum shifted from finger-pointing to heartfelt sharing of experiences. Veterans spoke candidly about their struggles adjusting to civilian life. Families shared their worries about loved ones without adequate resources, and activists laid out visions for future reform. All participants were erasing the lines that divided them, transforming conflict into conversation. Claire found herself deeply moved by these stories. Standing there amidst voices filled with pain, yet also hope, brought clarity to her purpose. She realized that although protests and demonstrations have their place in activism, there are also quieter but equally powerful ways to advocate for change, through listening, understanding, and forming genuine connections. As she took the stage again for closing remarks, Claire spoke with renewed conviction. "Today has shown us what can happen when we choose conversation over conflict," she said passionately. "Each story shared here is a step towards real understanding, a chance for us all to come together as one community." The audience erupted into applause as energy surged through the room, a collective recognition of not just progress, but also unity. Each participant left feeling inspired. Many signed up for advocacy groups or pledged to help amplify veterans' voices in their local communities. This momentum carried forward beyond the forum. What started with anger and violence evolved into a movement founded on collaboration and respect. In retrospect, Claire understood now that her actions at the charity event had ignited something profound. While it initially felt like an unfortunate escalation, it had ultimately led her down a path of growth, a transformative experience encompassing not just her journey, but also Admiral Mitchell's evolution as a leader willing to embrace vulnerability. The moral lesson that emerged from their intertwined fates was clear. Change is best facilitated through empathy and communication rather than confrontation. While passion can ignite movements, it takes compassion and respect to sustain them over time. They had learned together that the real strength lies not in throwing punches, but in extending hands, hands joined together in solidarity toward meaningful progress. As Claire walked away from the forum that day, she felt empowered by this newfound purpose, a commitment to continue advocating for veterans while fostering an environment conducive to respect and dialogue. Both she and Admiral Mitchell would carry this lesson forward, shaping not only their futures, but also influencing a generation striving for justice in ways that honor those who served their country with dignity and pride.